So as Alan mentioned, this is the last sermon in our sermon series from the book of Proverbs. I hope the series has been good for you. It's certainly been very good for me. We started back in April with this series, and we've been exploring many truths from Proverbs. We talked about how God's wisdom is more valuable than anything else, and I hope we've come to that conclusion that there is nothing more valuable than the wisdom of God. We talked about how the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That respect, that acknowledgement that God is the basic foundation of understanding truth. And then the rest of the sermons have been kind of topical sermons that we've drawn out of Proverbs about important things like being wise about friendship, being wise about self-control, being wise about sex and alcohol and the tongue, being wise about money and work and parenting. Last week we talked about being wise about justice. I think it's fitting that we end the series by talking about being wise about integrity. In many respects, integrity involves consistently putting all of God's truths into practice. That's what integrity involves. Doing God's things God's ways. The dictionary defines integrity as the state of being complete and unified. When people have integrity, then their words and their deeds, they match up. They're consistent with each other, right? They're who they are no matter where they are or no matter who they're with. They're consistent. They're complete. People with integrity are not divided. That's called duplicity. People of integrity are not just pretending. That's called hypocrisy. Rather, they are people of integrity. People of integrity are whole. Their lives are put together. They have nothing to hide. They have nothing to fear. Their lives are open books. It seems there was a time in our country when people cared about integrity, when having a good name and having a good reputation was really important, and people did everything they could to make sure that they had a good name and a good reputation. But I'm afraid most of that has kind of been lost in our day and time. Morals seem to be crumbling around us, right? Wall Street and business seem to reek with all kinds of corruption. Washington is full of people who seem less than upright, less than truthful. The judicial system seems to be compromised at times. And it seems that we just don't even expect people to be honest anymore. We expect them not to have integrity rather than the opposite. But it's against that kind of a dark background that Christians can shine most brightly. And as we put God's principles into practice, as we live with wisdom and integrity, then we can, like Paul talked about, we can be blameless and pure children of God who are faultless in a crooked and perverted generation, among whom you shine like stars in the world by holding firm to the word of life. You may recognize those words from Paul's letter to the Philippians. Proverbs calls us to live lives of integrity and ultimately to be blessed by our life of integrity. So here's some scattered verses. You'll recognize a couple of them. I pulled them out for the scripture reading. But he stores up success for the upright. He is a shield for those who live with integrity. Proverbs 10:9. The one who lives with integrity lives securely. But whoever perverts his ways will be found out. Proverbs 11:3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the perversity of the treacherous destroys them. Proverbs 13:6, righteousness guards people of integrity, but wickedness undermines the sinner. Proverbs 28:18, the one who lives with integrity will be helped, but the one who distorts right and wrong will suddenly fall. So I'm sure all of us want the good, positive things that come from a life of integrity. We want to have success. We want to be guided and guarded and shielded and all these good things that come up in these verses that we just read, right? We want to have assistance when we need help because people know we're someone of integrity who ought to be helped, right? And I'm sure all of us want to avoid the negative consequences of not having integrity, being unsuccessful, unshielded, unguarded, unguided, undermined, being without help, being found out, being destroyed. Integrity is a very practical thing, and it's a very personal thing. Adam Clarke, before he wrote his famous commentary on the Bible, he worked in this dry goods store where they sold fine fabrics, silk and other satin fabrics to a very kind of cultured clientele. Well, one day, Clark's employer pulled him aside and said, you know what? When you're measuring out the silk, if you stretch it while you measure it out, it will increase our profits. And Clark looked at his employer straight in the eye and he said, your silk may stretch, but my conscience won't. Right? That's integrity. I'm not stretching anything for profits. We're going to be fair and true and right in everything we do. In a similar story, I read about a teenage boy who was thrilled to get his first job in a store. And when he showed up for that first day of training, the manager explained to him, wisdom and integrity are essential in the retail business. And by integrity, I mean if you promise something, you've got to keep that promise, even if it means we lose money. And the boy said, okay. Well, what about wisdom? What is wisdom? And the boss answered, wisdom is never making a promise you don't want to keep. So integrity is keeping your promises, and wisdom is knowing which promises to make, because you got to keep the ones you make. When the writers of the New Testament were trying to communicate the quality of integrity, they would sometimes use words like truthful or incorruptibility or the word sincere, sincerity. The word sincerity has kind of an interesting background in its literal meanings in those earlier languages. The root word in Greek means judged in sunlight. And the root word that comes out of Latin for sincerity is this without wax. And so where did those ideas come from with regard to sincerity and integrity? It came from the world of pottery, where porcelain vessels and statues would be made, and sometimes they'd have cracks in them. And the way you'd hide the cracks is with wax. And so you might say, my pottery is sincere. My pottery is without wax, or has been judged in sunlight. And so the buyer would say, oh yeah, well let's check it out. And you take it out and you put it in the sun for a few minutes. And guess what? If it was without wax, you'd know it. If it was with wax, you would know it. As we try to live lives of integrity as disciples, we want our words and our lives to be sincere, without wax. We want them to be able to be held up to the scrutiny of the light, the sun, so that there would not be obvious cracks and defects that would become more apparent when the light is shown on them. Now, the idea of integrity is a key theme in the story of Job. Job 1:1 starts out, there was a man in the country of Uz, his name was Job, right? He was a man of complete integrity, who feared God and turned away from evil. And then later in that same chapter, God talks about Job saying to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity, who fears God and turns away from evil. Now, if you know the rest of the story of Job, you know there's this tension going on, right? There's this question. Is Job going to be able to hold on to his integrity and his faith in the midst of the sufferings he was going through? And of course, we're glad to know that in the end, the answer is yes. He did maintain his integrity. He believed in God enough. He was committed to God enough that he lived with faith and integrity. And he's this model for us of how to go through suffering with our faith and our integrity intact. It's a good thing, huh? The idea of integrity is also a key theme in the story of King David. Psalm 78 and verse 77 says this about David's integrity, and David shepherded them with integrity of heart, and with skillful hands he led them. And we know David was not perfect in his personal life, and yet he did have some integrity in his leadership in the kingdom. That text tells us that what made David's reign as king wonderful is that he performed his task of leadership with integrity. 1 Chronicles 29 and 17, David says, I know, my God, that you test the heart and are pleased with integrity. And so that reveals two important things about God to us. Number one, he's one who is looking and testing the hearts of people. And what God's looking for is integrity, this wholeness, this consistency, this oneness. In 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 4 and 5, we notice what God said to Solomon, David's son, as Solomon was taking over the kingdom. God said to Solomon, as for you, if you walk before me in integrity of heart, with uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command, observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever. How's that for a promise? Unfortunately, we know Solomon didn't do that. He didn't walk with the kind of integrity that David had walked with, and therefore, after Solomon, the kingdom divided and started its spiral downward, right? Let's explore a number of practical aspects of living with integrity that come out of these verses in Proverbs about integrity. And let's start with the first one. First, integrity means telling the truth and keeping your promises even when it hurts. And this is a topic we have touched on during our series, this truth speaking. But Proverbs 12:17, a truthful witness gives an honest testimony, but a false witness tells lies. In Psalm 15 and verse 1, we're told, the question is asked, who may dwell in your sanctuary and who may live on your holy hill? He whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous. And then a number of things are listed about righteous living. And in verse 4, one is whoever keeps his oath even when it hurts. Telling the truth, being true to our promises is hard. But the righteous person, the person of integrity, does so even when it's hard, right? In an earlier illustration in the sermon, that store manager said wisdom is never making a promise you don't want to keep. And that's part of what wisdom is. And so we have to be careful about the things that we say. Careful about the promises we make. Don't make rash vows, right? If you know you can't, then don't say that you can, right? And if you don't know if you can, then say, I don't know if I can, right? Just be truthful about it. Learning to say no up front is a lot better than saying yes and coming back and saying no later. I know that we can't always make sure that doesn't happen, but we have to be careful about making promises that we can't keep. People of integrity speak the truth and keep their promises. Secondly, integrity means owning up to our mistakes. Alan said this. I appreciate Alan's thoughts at the call to worship time, but none of us are perfect. None of us are ever going to be perfect. Is that a surprise to you? Of course not. But when we fall, when we fail, when we make a mistake, the sooner we own up to it, the better. Proverbs 14:9 says, "Fools make fun of guilt, but the godly acknowledge it and seek reconciliation." Fools want to downplay mistakes and sins and things like that. Don't own up to it. Wasn't my fault, somebody else. But righteous people, people of integrity say, no, that's on me. That's on me. I messed up there. And please forgive me, right? Back in 1990, a professional golfer named Steve Elkington owned up to a mistake and it cost him $10,000. 2 weeks earlier, Elkington had won his very first PGA championship match, right? 2 weeks later, he didn't win. He came in 21st. But as he was reading the official stats on the game, he noticed that it had his score wrong. It said he had scored a 79 on the last day, which put him tied for 21st place, but he had actually scored an 80. He went back and he looked at his own scorecard that he had signed, and he'd made a mistake in the addition. And so he really didn't come in 21st place. So what did he do? He contacted the PGA immediately to let them know about the mistake. And say, well, no big deal, right? I didn't come in 21st, I came in 22nd, a few $100 difference. No. PGA rules say if you sign a card incorrectly, you are disqualified. And any prize money is forfeited. So $25,000 or $10,000 in 1990 dollars today would be $25,000. Still a good sum of money for sure to just say goodbye. He could have just been quiet. Nobody probably would have noticed. It would never have been found out. I mean, he did come in 22nd. He did deserve some pay. It was an honest mistake, but he was a person of integrity. And he brought their attention to it. And of course, he paid for it, right? Number 3, integrity means treating people justly, equally, and without prejudice. We're not going to go into detail here. We spent all last week on this subject. It's an important one. We can't be considered people of integrity if we show prejudice or partiality or favoritism. We can't be people of integrity in God's sight if we do those things. Number 4, integrity means being a good steward of our finances, paying our debts, being generous, of course, never stealing or cheating. We can't be considered people of integrity if we don't pay our debts, if we don't follow through with our financial promises. Obviously, we can't be considered people of integrity if we cheat or steal. Proverbs 28:6, better a poor person who lives with integrity than a rich one who distorts right and wrong. And as we try to be good stewards, we can't be people of integrity if we're stingy and selfish with our money. Psalm 37:21 says, the wicked person borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one is gracious and giving. Proverbs 11:24, one person gives freely, yet gains more. Another withholds what is right, only to become poor. Proverbs 22:9, a generous person will be blessed, for he shares his food with the poor. And so how we handle our money is important to our discipleship and our faith, that we pay our bills and that we are generous with our money. Number 5, integrity means fulfilling our responsibilities, which includes being faithful to our spouse, our children, and our parents. No one can be considered a person of integrity who cheats on their spouse or neglects their children or their parents. Those two things just can't go together, right? Integrity and not being faithful to responsibilities. People who say they love God and who say they love their family must be faithful to carry out these most basic parts of responsibility to spouses and children and parents. Now, certainly showing love and faithfulness, as well as basic financial provision, are a minimum to be considered living with integrity. Paul wrote, if anyone does not provide for his own family, especially his own household, he's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever, 1 Timothy 5 and verse 8. Number 6, integrity means being hardworking, a hardworking, trustworthy employee. We spent a week talking about being wise about work. And so again, we won't go into great detail here. Proverbs has a lot to say about working with integrity. Because of our devotion to God, because of our commitment to ethical living, Christians should be the hardest working and most trusted employees, right? Any worldly business person out there, for the most part, should be thrilled to have Christians working for them, unless they're breaking laws and doing things handed, right? Then they don't want any Christians involved. But they know if they have a Christian involved, that the Christian doesn't have to be watched like a hawk. See if they're stealing stuff or not working when they should be working or not carrying out their duties and saying that they are, right? Christians don't have to be watched closely or don't have to be motivated repeatedly to be productive and honest workers, because our goal is to please the heavenly boss. And most earthly bosses, I think, could be pleased if we're trying to please our heavenly boss. And then finally, integrity means being a good citizen by obeying the laws of our country. Paul said it well in Romans 13 when he wrote, let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God. Remember, Paul's writing this when the Romans were in charge of the world, basically, right? So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves, for rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the one in authority? Do what is good, and you'll have its approval. For it is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. For it is God's servant, an avenger that brings wrath on the one who does wrong. Therefore you must submit, not only because of wrath, but also because of your conscience. People of integrity should be law keepers, not law breakers. We should follow the law, not just because we're afraid of punishment that might come, but because of conscience, because of our commitment to God and to be God's person. As people of faith who are trying to live in obedience to God, we must live in obedience to the laws of our country and our state. And unless the laws of our country or our state are against the laws of God, and once in a while they are, when they are, we must obey God first and foremost. But when these laws are not against God's laws, they must be obeyed. We can't be considered people of integrity if we just have a disregard for the law, if we just flaunt ourselves to the law. And there's all kinds of laws we could bring up that people often have that kind of an attitude towards. That doesn't apply to me, or it doesn't matter, I'll do what I want to do. Whether it's driving the speed limit, or driving without a license, or driving or fishing without a license, or or building something without a permit, working under the table. Those are just a few of the kinds of laws that people are often like, yeah, that's not important. That's not serious. I don't need to do that. Striving to live uprightly, with integrity, without reproach, has to do with religious things and moral things and legal things. Near Florence, Alabama, there's a cemetery where most graves in that cemetery are 150 to 200 years old. And in that cemetery, there's a certain grave of someone who died around 1865 and has this one statement engraved under their name. And the statement is, "A man of unquestioned integrity." That's something, right? That's amazing that that would be on someone's gravestone. I don't know if they chose that for themselves or if their family chose it for them, but either way, that's quite a statement. That this man had lived in a way that no one could question their integrity. They were above reproach. But isn't that the kind of life and the kind of goal that God lays before us? That we ought to be living in this way with integrity and wisdom, and consistency and godliness and righteousness. Let me end with something written by Ted Engstrom, a Christian leader and author, in his book, Making of a Christian Leader. The world needs men and women who cannot be bought, whose word is their bond, who put character above wealth, who possess opinions and a will, who are larger than their vocations, who do not hesitate to take chances, who do not lose their individuality in a crowd, who will be honest in small things as in great things, who will make no compromise with wrong, whose ambitions are not confined to their own selfish desires, who will not say they do it because everyone else is doing it, who are true to their friends through good report and evil report, in adversity as well as prosperity, who do not believe that shrewdness and cunning and hard-headedness are the best qualities for winning success, who are not ashamed or afraid to stand for the truth when it's unpopular, who can say no with emphasis, although the rest of the world says yes. These are people of character, right? People of integrity. And the world needs people like this. And the church needs us to be people like this. God's wisdom is indeed more valuable than anything. And I pray that all of us will put God's wisdom into daily practice with integrity, consistency, wholeness. And will be blessed because of it, as will the church and the world.